You guys have been requesting a video on parasocial relationships for a while now, and I never really had an interest in this topic until something that happened very recently, which we'll get into in a sec. So I'm finally going to share my thoughts on parasocial relationships, what they are, how they look like, and honestly, you might not like what I have to say about it, so let's get into it. The term parasocial relationships was first coined by Horton and Wool in 1956 to describe an illusory or imaginal relationship that a viewer or an audience member has with a public figure, such as a musician, a celebrity, an actor, a content creator. It's one directional, where the person consuming that public figure's whatever has concocted a relationship in their head, and the public figure basically has no idea who they are. Now, we typically think of this as a modern-day issue, but it's been around since ancient Rome when they had public speakers. Yes, it's definitely gotten more of a hot topic with the rise of social media, but make no mistake, this isn't something new. And the reason for that is that we're all prone to parasocial relationships. When we relate to the barista who gives us our coffee every day, even though we don't actually know them when we're not that close to them. When we grow attached to a fictional character and we get really sad when they get killed off. When we get angry at a celebrity or we really empathize with them and we've never actually met them. When we feel like we're friends with a content creator. We're all prone to parasocial relationships because on some level we're programmed to have them. We're programmed to bond with people, and our mind doesn't really distinguish between what's real and what's imaginary very well. And I actually think this is kind of a good thing, because our ability to relate to people even though we've never met them, and our ability to empathize with people and humanize them, is a really good thing. There are some people out there who will literally just dehumanize public figures, who don't see them as real and go on and bully them and harass them because they're forgetting that that's a real person on the other side of the screen. I think having the ability to form a parasocial relationship is much better than that. But online parasocial relationships get a really bad rep. And modern research suggests that they're not actually just unhealthy. You can have a healthy parasocial relationship, or it can veer into unhealthy. So a healthy parasocial relationship a lot of times is born out of loneliness, isolation, not having a group to belong to, not having friends in your real life, and viewing someone you've never actually met kind of like a proxy for connection. Have you guys ever seen the movie Lars and the Real Girl with Ryan Gosling? It's a really psychologically fascinating movie. And in that movie, Lars, the main character, forms a delusional attachment to a doll, like a blow-up doll. Because in that moment, the doll is a transitional object for him. He doesn't have any connection in his real life. He's had a trigger for grief that he never previously resolved. And he needs to work through that, through the transitional object, before he's ready to go out in the real world and form real relationships. I think of parasocial relationships as kind of similar to that. We live in a very lonely world. A lot of people don't have friends, haven't dated anyone. That energy has to go somewhere. And if you can practice that friendship and companionship and intimacy in your mind, as long as you don't detach from reality and think that it's real, and as long as you do then transition onto real relationships, that can be a good thing. It can be you working through your issues. So studies show that parasocial relationships can result in a sense of companionship and comfort and security. Like I said, it also reflects our ability to relate to other people, to empathize with them, to feel for them, even though we're not close with them. It shows that our ability to relate to others is intact, which is a good thing. And also, I think parasocial relationships can facilitate self-development. You know, like, there are a lot of YouTubers that I follow, for instance, who I've learned a lot from. But just by listening to them talk about different aspects of their lives, their business, their relationships, it's helped me learn some lessons too. Of course, I don't know these people. I'm not their friend. I am not going to reach out to them to try to be their friend. But their personality has, even through the screen, had an effect on my personality, and I'm grateful for that. Now, where parasocial relationships start to become unhealthy. Definitely if it's interfering with your day-to-day life, if it's impairing your functioning in some way, like if you are choosing to be obsessed with your favorite celebrity instead of going out and hanging out with friends, or actually dating somebody who you have a shot with. Or if you're getting into fights because you're constantly defending whoever you stan, if it's repeatedly causing you distress, I think it's okay to every now and then feel a painful emotion spurred by somebody that we don't actually know, somebody who's a public figure. Of course, we often displace and project our issues onto public figures. But if it's happening very often, then that's not healthy. If the public figure is exercising undue influence, meaning if they're somehow manipulating you or convincing you to, to do something that they want, or like give them all your money, or vote for a certain political candidate, or join their cult or whatever, that's when it gets unhealthy also. And especially if it's turning into a delusion or an obsession. If you lose sight of the fact that this is an imaginary relationship, then it ceases to become healthy. It's okay to, in your heart, feel a connection with people you haven't actually met before or aren't that intimate with. What's not okay, and what you should be very mindful of, is forgetting that that is all just imaginary, that there isn't an actual relationship there, that this person doesn't know you, isn't close with you, that you are essentially fabricating a relationship. And I think they also get unhealthy when we idealize or devalue public figures, when we either think that they're, the greatest prophet of all time and we're doxing their critics online, or when we completely devalue them by canceling them or threatening them or things like that. Now, here's the part that you might not like to hear me say. I think online people talk about parasocial relationships quite often as if it is the public figures who are to blame for their viewers' inappropriate behavior. And while I think that there are some pretty rare occasions where public figures do sort of stoke the flames of their fans' obsessions, like I said, that's pretty rare. Most of the time, I think this discussion kind of veers into victim blaming of the public figure. It is our responsibility as consumers of whatever form of media to make sure that it doesn't get out of hand, to make sure that we don't lose touch with reality or behave inappropriately with other people, or make sure that those parasocial relationships don't become unhealthy and extreme. A few examples of how public figures can sometimes encourage that kind of unhealthy parasocial behavior is, for instance, public figures who constantly make their viewers or subscribers or whatever feel like they're friends. Like, oh, hey, we're friends here, or we're part of the same pack. Like, I'm your friend, usually because they want your money. A really good example of this is when people go on these content creator trips together. That is the epitome of a parasocial relationship being fueled. When people date fans, I think that veers into parasocial. I mean, sure, you could say, well, okay, initially it's a one-sided relationship, but once the public figure engages with the fan, it becomes bi-directional. Yes, but you're starting off with a pretty huge power discrepancy. You're starting off with one person who has already fabricated a relationship with this person in their head. You cannot start a healthy relationship based on a fabrication as the foundation. Even if you go on to develop an actual relationship, it cannot be like this person is your fan. I think there's a difference between somebody dating like a fan who's obsessed with them versus one content creator reaching out to another content creator because they have things in common and deciding to become friends. Those things are different. One of them has a huge power discrepancy and an unhealthy parasocial relationship, and the other is just starting off as a parasocial relationship on an even playing field and becoming an actual relationship. Or another example of people kind of stoking the flames, I've heard this Taylor Swift quote, "I need you guys very much for my well-being." I would put that as like a little bit dubious, to say a little bit stoking the flames. But here's what's not an unhealthy parasocial relationship. Responding to a viewer or fan or whatever, either online or in person, with courtesy and warmth, the same level of politeness and kindness that you would give to anybody that you see throughout your day. That doesn't make it unhealthy. Publicly sharing about your personal life, that's not necessarily unhealthy. Feeling happy or sad for somebody whose journey you followed along, that's not unhealthy. Basically anything that you would do in real life. If you're going about your days, you see somebody crying on the sidewalk, of course, as a decent human being, you're going to go up to them and ask them, hey, are you okay? Do you need anything? Just the same, if you see somebody who you follow on social media who's posted about something tragic that's happened, I think it's perfectly healthy to comment something like that. Like, I'm so sorry that you're going through this. Or just the same as you're like friendly with the supermarket cashier. If a celebrity is equally friendly with a fan of theirs, that is not necessarily unhealthy. They're just being a decent human being. I think if a viewer or fan or whatever you want to call them develops an unhealthy attachment to a public figure, unless the public figure has done something to actually bring on an unhealthy attachment to them, That is the viewer's responsibility to work through and figure out. I say this so often on this channel, we are not responsible for the feelings or the actions of other people. People don't deserve to be on the receiving end of unhealthy parasocial attachments just because their job requires them to be a public figure. And I realize I'm probably biased about this because honestly, I have had scary experiences like that. You know, I do have subscribers who occasionally get really angry at me for not responding to their message or their comment, who sometimes create countless other accounts from which to harass me for it. And even other experiences that I don't even want to talk about because I don't acknowledge stalkers. No public figure owes you a relationship just because you have fabricated an imaginary one in your head. So there was a very recent and very real incident that spurred this reflection for me. I followed this TikTok comedy couple. Their content is just always so relatable. They somehow managed to nail the intricate dynamics of what it means to be married, and I don't know how they do it. So they're wonderful. And I actually mentioned this in a previous video, but there was a child-free influencer who made a video about Kat and John getting pregnant, basically saying that she feels disappointed because their content won't be relatable for her anymore now that they're having a kid. And I took issue with this video, not because I think it's abnormal to feel disappointment when you can't relate to somebody anymore. I think, like I said, it's okay to have emotional reactions to what public figures do. But in this case, I did feel like she was trying to normalize an unhealthy type of parasocial relationship where we feel actually entitled to other people's lives being relatable to us. And you know, even if that does come up, even if you have that sort of emotional content that arises in you, I think it's important to be able to work through it, if necessary privately, you know, with a therapist, with a journal, with your friends, rather than putting that sort of sentiment out in the world. Again, let's think about this from the standpoint of how would this look out in the real world? Let's say that out in the real world, you have like a friend of a friend, let's say somebody who's very popular, who just got pregnant, and you've never actually met her, but you've heard a lot about her. Would it be normal for you to go around telling everybody at that point, oh, I'm kind of disappointed that she did that because, you know, I look up to her socially and now she's not relatable to me? No, that would be super inappropriate. And unfortunately, yesterday I heard that Kat and John had a miscarriage, a very late miscarriage. The reason why I've been thinking about parasocial relationships a lot is because I cried a lot when they announced that. I mean, I cried when they announced their pregnancy and I cried when they announced their miscarriage. And I was just thinking about how, you know, there's nothing wrong with having an emotional reaction to what public figures do. What can become unhealthy is what we choose to do with those feelings. In this situation, I think it would be perfectly fine, like countless of people have done, to write a comment saying, oh my God, I'm so sorry, my heart goes out to you, I hope you heal. On the other hand, it wouldn't be normal to say, you know, email them constantly telling them about your own experiences and ask them to reach out to you so that the two of you can support each other. Like, that would be a boundary violation. Don't do anything you wouldn't do in real life. Let's say that you're in a waiting room and you just heard that the couple next to you just had a miscarriage. The normal thing to do would be to express your condolences, to ask if they need anything in the moment, maybe even to feel sympathy, to tear up a little bit for them. Would it be normal to still be crying about this incident weeks later? To try to contact them, offering your support? To demand to be in their lives? No, that would not be normal. Also, like, just a side note, but why is that TikTok still up, girl? Why is it still up? I find it to be very distasteful. To make a TikTok expressing disappointment that a couple you don't know got pregnant and then keep that up even after they had a miscarriage just feels so classless to me. Obviously, like, she didn't cause this, like, it's not her fault that this happened, but, like, read the room a little bit. Anyway, that's the situation that kind of sparked me reflecting on parasocial relationships and the ways in which they can be fine or the ways in which they can be unhealthy. I think the messages I'd like to drive home about this topic are, firstly, parasocial relationships are not inherently unhealthy, like people on the internet want you to believe. They're a sign that your ability to relate to other people and to bond to other people are intact, and that's a good thing. They can become unhealthy. This is pretty rare, but you should look out for it. You should make sure that it's not becoming delusional or that you're not engaging in inappropriate behaviors. I think it is the responsibility of the public figure to not encourage unhealthy parasocial relationships And it's also the responsibility of the person engaging with the public figure to make sure they appropriately express whatever emotions come up for them, to make sure that they're not behaving inappropriately, that they're not actually believing they have a relationship with this person. Just ask yourself, especially with like social media interactions, every time you're about to have a social media interaction with somebody, ask yourself, would I do this in real life? I think you might be surprised. A lot of the things we do online, if we stop and ask ourselves that question, we might hold back on a little bit. There's always great discourse in my comment section, so I am genuinely curious to hear what your thoughts are. Take care.